What is good, everybody? Welcome back. This is the Coast to Coast podcast. I'm Joey Powell. I'm trying to hold it together because of my own gaffe prior to starting this recording. We appreciate you joining us here on InsideCarolina.com. If you're listening via however you consume podcasts or watching us on YouTube, we appreciate you being here. Rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. We need you to take care of that. Leave us a good review. If you don't like what we're doing, let us know so we can try to do better about that and not give you garbage content. With us tonight, some gentlemen that I've known for quite some time. I've spent many hours in the podcasting world with them. Definitely not a situation where I would mess up one of their names or something like that. Sherrell, McMillan, Sean Moran, boys, how are you?
Doing
Doing
well.
well.
Yeah.
Yes, Jinx, buy me a Coke. Um, I realize I never throw to one of you specifically when I say that, and then you're both like waiting. All right, who goes first? Who goes first? That's on me. But man, I'm full of them tonight. Appreciate you guys being here, guys. We've got some things to talk about, and before we get into it, I want to make sure that all of our listeners and viewers will give some love to Johnny T-shirt. We'll talk a little bit more about them later, but they're responsible for bringing this content to you. So make sure you thank the folks at Johnny T. A lot of recruiting stuff happened, and right towards the end of the week, it almost felt like a mainstream media news dump. Right, a lot of stuff got out right at afternoon on Friday, and specifically offers going out to Justin Taylor and Derek Lively. Sean, I'll go to you first. What can you tell us about Derek Lively's game?
Yeah, Derek Lively, 6'11", 7-foot center. Currently on the 24/7 website is listed at 200 pounds. So definitely, a thin guy, but he runs the floor well. Pretty strong defensively with his shot blocking and timing. Right now, offensively, when you watch him and read about him, the key word is that you kind of see often is he's improving. So right now, really good in the pick and roll with his length, great at catching lobs, but also kind of being hit with the ball right after the pick and roll when he's going to the basket. He's shown an ability to shoot from the outside, so he does have that. I wouldn't say that it is his strong suit now, but in terms of how his game trends, he definitely, looks more like a pick and pop five almost. But I think as he gets stronger, he'll be able to establish the post game. So I think he's a pretty intriguing prospect just from a talent perspective. Just given his height, his coordination and skill level, I think he needs to get a little bit more explosive as well as stronger, which everybody does at that age. But definitely an interesting guy to watch. But we'll throw it to Rel, I guess, for more information on the recruitment and things like that. But he's a guy that is definitely not at the peak of his talent level right now.
Awesome. And Sean's pretty much doing my job for me at this point. Sherelle, what can you tell me about the backstory around the Lively offer and his recruitment in general?
Yeah, I mean, there's a gaff, and then Sean's doing your job for you. Watch behind your back,
It's
man.
just a matter of time before Buck pulls the plug on this whole thing. I'll get a future endeavor message posted on Inside Carolina, and I'll be off down the road, and you'll never hear from me again.
So with Lively, honestly, man, we're still learning about him. He's one of those players, and we talked about this on the radio show. Again, always listen Saturdays 10 a.m. WCHL Inside Carolina Live, Joey and Tommy. We talked about it yesterday in that he's just someone who North Carolina would have watched. And I know people get tired of me saying that, but he's someone they would have watched in the spring and the summer on the AU circuit just to learn more about, to better understand their game. And I think this is one of those offers where Carolina looks around and says, you know what, we need big men in 2022. And, there's a possibility that all the bigs on the roster right now are gone by the time the 2022 class enrolls. So, you have to start rebuilding. And to do that, you can't just offer one or two guys. You got to put out, multiple offers if you're going to sign multiple bigs. And right now, I would say the offer is really Dylan Anderson is a center out from Arizona, has a UNC offer. And then, Jarris Walker, I think some people feel can play kind of the four, kind of a face-up four in college. So he's the other one. So I think the Lively offer, really more than anything, was getting another player, an offer that they liked, that they can really start to recruit and get to know. And then hopefully when things open back up, get him on campus. As far as him as a player, Sean really nailed it. But kind of the things he said to some of the 24/7 sports reporters, it gives you a little bit of pause when it comes to North Carolina. He's openly talked about being one and done, which there have been plenty of players who've come to Carolina and openly talked about being one and done. But when you add that to what he likes to do, and he said it to Deshaun London, who is a 24/7 national sports um, and recruiting analyst. Basically, he wants to be in the pick and pop, pick and roll, and he wants to shoot threes. I mean, he literally said that. And Roy Williams will allow bigs to shoot threes, but it takes time. He's not going to come in and it's not going to be ball screens and he's going to be picking and popping all the time. So that that gave me a little bit of pause when I was reading that about how serious I should take his interest in UNC post offer. So I just want to put that out there. Like it's an offer and it's someone they'll recruit, but I do wonder how much he knows about UNC. And if once he finds out more about UNC, if it's still a place he wants to consider.
Appreciate that honesty and throwing that caveat out there. I definitely think that hopefully our listeners and viewers have come to expect that we're going to tell them the truth, especially on how you can read these recruitments and what from talking to people around the recruitments. We're not just going to say that, hey, this kid's got an offer, UNC has a chance, or he's going to come visit, or anything like that. And you're not saying that UNC doesn't have a chance, but I appreciate you giving that refreshing, honest view of things as opposed to just throwing some sugarcoating on it. And the other offer went out to Justin Taylor, who's somebody we've talked about on here before, and I believe Sean has previewed him in an article in his the in-depth looks he does for Inside Carolina. Sean, you want to kind of give a recap of Justin Taylor's game?
Yeah, and first, I guess thanks to Sherrell for kind of going a little deeper on Lively. That's why I wanted to throw it to him. The only other thing to add on him, his mom played at Penn State, very talented, and I think she works at Penn State currently. So always watch for that and see if that Penn State factors in. But in terms of Taylor, I think when I was watching the two, he definitely struck me as more realistic for Carolina, as well as in terms of his game. I think very skilled, which is I think the key word and what Carolina needs to recruit going forward, in terms of his size, his shooting ability. From an athletic perspective, he can definitely finish above the rim. I think the one improvement point for him is his ability to beat people off the dribble. Right now, he has a pretty good step back jumper, which kind of alleviates maybe some of those issues. But I think you watch the highlights and he's perfectly fine pulling up from the NBA 3-point line, and is a very confident shooter. So right there with that size and shooting ability was something that I liked right off the bat. I think it'll be interesting, knock on wood, if the AAU season hopefully happens this year. He should be playing for Team Takeover, and just kind of seeing how he performs at that level will be interesting. He comes from Charlottesville. The offer came right before the UVA game. Probably not the best game, right before to give an offer. So it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. But I think, from a skill set perspective, is definitely one that Carolina's going to be going after pretty hard.
Good stuff. And I appreciate, again, the backstory on who he is as a player and the type of offense that he fits in, because I think that's something that a lot of our listeners and viewers on YouTube are coming to expect from you. So I appreciate you getting down into the kind of the meta about Taylor's game. Sherrell, you want to give us the same kind of synopsis about where the recruiting stands with him and kind of what that story looks like?
Yeah, and when Roy Williams is recruiting someone, a lot of times he won't give a player comparable immediately. That's something that comes, either on a visit or after a few conversations. But the offer conversation that he had with Taylor on Friday was just the second time that they talked, and he mentioned by name Justin Jackson as kind of the UNC comparable for Taylor. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Just the way they play, kind of a long, not necessarily super athletic, but long, skilled, somewhat athletic three, who can come off screens, who can get his own shot, who can rebound, who can do all the things that Carolina wings are supposed to do. So like Sean said, I do think it is a fit. And I think it shows you the seriousness in which they are starting to recruit him, because they mentioned Justin Jackson, who was a top 10 player when he came out of high school. And so the other schools involved, there's a lot, but just from talking to folks, Syracuse, Indiana, Virginia seem to be kind of in that top tier. That's by no means an official list or anything, but I would say outside of UNC, now that it's offered, you hear a ton about Syracuse, Indiana, and Virginia.
Mm.
And obviously UVA is the home school. He's not at his high school, he's not at a boarding school, and he's from somewhere else. That's actually where he's from Charlottesville, born and raised there, has lived there a long time. He works out with UVA pros. He's been to the campus countless times because it's right down the street. So it is going to be tough with UVA kind of looming over. However, his when we talked to him on Friday night, he was very adamant that he's made no decisions and that he wasn't a UVA lock. I mean, of course, what would you expect him to say? But he was very adamant that he wasn't, that he was really going to consider other schools, and that the Carolina offer was a big one for him. And I believe him, honestly. Doing this for a while, you can kind of tell when someone is maybe not being forthright, but I really think he was, and I really think he's going to consider North Carolina heavily.
And one thing we will not stand for is, 17 and 18-year-old kids not being forthright with Sherrell McMillan. That's just absolutely not something that this podcast is about, nor would we endorse in any way, shape, or form. But it is good that it sounds like he's giving you the real dirt, and that it's not just a song and dance that he will end up at UVA. I mean, he may go to UVA, but to your point, it does sound like he's actually going through the recruiting process. Other recruits of note, and signees, commitments, however you want to frame that. We talked about this on Inside Carolina Live a little bit with Sherrell on Saturday, but Sean, I'll let you give your analysis of DeMarco Dunn against an unnamed in-conference opponent this past week, going for 38 on a very, very efficient evening. Do you want to talk a little bit about Mr. Dunn's offensive output?
Yeah, so I haven't been able to kind of watch the full game from that one, and I know we've talked about Dunn the last 2 weeks, but I think once again, for him, even before that game, he was, or I guess before this week, he was shooting 40% from the 3-point line, and he's been doing it pretty efficiently without a lot of wasted dribbles, a lot of wasted motion. I think once again, for him, the more games he plays, the more, I think the better. His shooting is going to definitely help Carolina next year. In terms of him being a starter, let's not put those expectations right now. But I think in terms of him just continuing to get more confident, he's scoring 20, 25, 30 points routinely. And he's doing that at a very efficient level. So the more 30-point games we see from him, the better. And I think he's a threat to do that pretty much every time he goes out on the court. And once again, he's not a guy, for the most part, that's going to take 30 shots to do it. So I think everything he gets comes within the offense, and he's continuing to improve, because you can really go back a year and a half and he didn't have the range that he has right now. He was short on a lot of his 3-pointers in AAU, and he's gotten taller, stronger, and that range has increased.
Yeah, and just looking at his number of field goal attempts from the other night, I mentioned before we recorded today, it wasn't like he was out there just chucking, right? It was a pretty good percentage, kind of to play off of what you were just sharing about, that he was shooting around 40. Sherrell, anything that you want to share with folks? Maybe I think you gave a great analysis about low usage, high efficiency, I think was the phrase that you put together on the radio show on Saturday. Am I misspeaking, or is that kind of what you were trying to intimate?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Low usage, high efficiency, and in North Carolina offense, the wing, it's important, but it's not as important as the point guard or the big. And that's just something that UNC wings have to realize. They can, play really well within the system, but the system kind of has advantages for the lead guard and for the center. So if you're a wing, you just need to be able to take advantage of your opportunities when they come. And I think Dunn will be able to do that when he gets to UNC. What kind of fascinates me, and thinking bigger picture, is you start to see this core for UNC of what should be some really, really good shooters who are multi-year players on the college level. So Kerwin Walton, we think, is going to be a multi-year player. Puff Johnson, although he's kind of his freshman year's kind of got sidelined between getting behind with COVID protocols and then getting injured, you think he's going to be a really good shooter before his time's over at Carolina. RJ Davis, same thing. You think he's going to be a really good shooter before his time is over at Carolina. DeMarco Dunn, you think he's going to be a really good shooter before his time is over at Carolina. So that's four guys right there. And then some of the players in 2021 and 2022 they're going after also have that skill of being marksmen, of known for being good shooters. So it makes me wonder, like, are they going to ever be able to kind of marry it where the bigs and the shooters are on the court at the same time, not freshmen, kind of all experience? Because if you go back to looking at 2017, that they had it. They had the experienced bigs, they had the experienced wings, the experienced guards, and they all, Justin Jackson and Joel Berry had the most 3-point attempts of any duo in Carolina history, the championship season. And then they had three bigs and a Luke May, down low that they, could utilize. But then when you go to 18, they were so perimeter heavy with Pinson and Barry and Cam Johnson and Luke May. Same thing again the next year with Kenny and Kobe and Luke May and Nasir Little. So, that happens. And then they signed Dayron Sharp. They signed Walker Kessler.
And they
They
get four
signed
bigs
Armando
right
Baycott.
after.
Yeah. And then so last year, you're looking at the roster, and you're like, there's no guards or wings, And then this year, you're looking at they have them, but they're not experienced, but they have four, really, pretty good bigs. So now it's like, okay, we expect Garrison to be gone after this season, and probably at least one other big to be gone. And so that diminishes the pool. So you're down to two, but you still have all these really good wings that we talked about who we think are going to be a good shooter. So all that to say, it's just curious to me. It's like they can't quite balance it where all the wings or most of the wings and most of the bigs are experienced. It's kind of either or. So I'm curious to see if they'll be able to get that in the next couple of years, especially with the core you expect to be there of Kerwin, RJ Davis, Puff Johnson, DeMarco Dunn, Dontre Styles, Anthony Harris, especially with that core. If they can just make sure there's two or three bigs, I mean, I think you have to feel really good about the future of UNC moving forward with those guys.
Yeah, and you wonder too, as the game continues to evolve, you know, is that recipe, is it ready a year ahead of time, maybe as opposed to having juniors and seniors like they did in 17? Could you pull it off with juniors and sophomores? Or could you pull it off, something like that? It's really, I'm with you. It is perplexing. It is entertaining to see, can they have all of the dishes ready to be served to the table at the same time so that one's not overdone and one's not underdone. It's a little bit of a juggling act. Something that is not a juggling act is shopping with Johnny T-shirt, because you always know that you're going to get the top quality gear. You're going to get it at a very, very fair price, and you're going to get it quickly if you have it shipped. Or you can just go pick it up from them at their store on Franklin Street. JohnnyT-shirt.com, big supporters of North Carolina, or at InsideCarolina.com. North Carolina graduates is what I was trying to say there. So alumni owned, alumni operated, huge fans of Inside Carolina, what we do, and we're fans of them. If you ever need UNC gear, you're trying to do some home gating, trying to just make your game atmosphere fun, hit them up. If you like things other than basketball and football, they have all kinds of gear for all of the sports that North Carolina entertains. The North Carolina Athletic Department sponsors very, very many varsity sports. Well, Johnny T-shirt has swag for all those sports. Um, had a lot of success with the men's and women's tennis teams. They have that stuff too. Hit Johnny T-shirt up. Use the premium subscriber extra 10% off top of their great prices to begin with, and you will be happy that you did. So we appreciate Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com, right there on Franklin Street. Take care of them, and they will take care of you. Right now, we'll let the national guys come in, drop some ads in. We'll be right back. Talk about the week that was in UNC basketball. Hey, thanks for sticking around. You're listening to the Coast to Coast podcast. I'm Joey Powell. With me, as always, Sean Moran, Sherrell, McMillan. Fellas, UNC did not have a game midweek this past week due to Miami seeing the videos that floated on social media. Those circles were kind of bleeding out into the media. People were making stories about it that may or may not have been stories, whatever. Won't get into that. But that leaves the only game that they've played since we last talked about the Duke game was the game against Virginia. And once again, UNC goes to Charlottesville. It's a house of horrors. Sean, I know you're a huge UVA fan and you love their style of basketball as I do. Is there anything that North Carolina could have done other than make shots to do better in this game?
It's a good question. I mean, I think once again, similar. So we had the Duke game and the Clemson game, and we're basically, it's like doing a podcast right after the Clemson game almost. UVA exerted their style of play and how they, their physicalness. UNC just started out slow, and the game was pretty much over, 6 minutes in. So could they have done? Yeah, they could have. They missed some easy shots. But once again, from a team's perspective, you unfortunately, I think, knew what you were going to get. This isn't a team that is a great shooting team. It's not one that makes crisp passes, unfortunately. And UVA, while they're first place in the ACC, it's not like they were running away with it. Their points per possession was 1.03. It was just UNC was right at the Clemson level almost. I think we all knew it wasn't going to be a Duke defense. And I think we kind of brought that up on the podcast to try to, it was a great win and Caleb Love did great, but that's why the Miami game would have been nice to potentially have that game to work in, because we knew what we were going to see on Saturday with kind of the pack line D. Rewatched the game this morning, which was just as frustrating. I think it would have been nice just to try to establish the bigs a little bit more. Right off the bat, 3-4 possessions in, they got 4. You're not going to say they're great shots. First one, Garrison Brooks off a pick and roll, but they weren't bad shots. But right. In terms, it's Brooks taking 2, Leaky taking 2. And once again, you just kind of needed to come out with, you needed to hit them a little bit in terms of establishing a lead and establishing a presence, because once again, they went a few minutes without scoring, but all of a sudden they hit 2 threes and it's 6-2. And then it just kind of spiraled after that. But they only scored 4 points in 10 minutes. Only have a few field goals in the first 14. It was just a frustrating experience.
Yeah, Sherrell, I'll give you the same opportunity to puke on the microphone here if you'd like.
I mean, I don't really have anything to say, honestly. I mean, it's what you expect when Carolina plays Virginia now, and it's kind of a sad state of affairs. I mean, I understand that this UNC team is young and has been through a lot, but good UNC teams go to UVA and lose in ugly fashion. The national championship team, I think, put up 40-something points.
Got worked, yes.
Yeah, so I think it's just a schematic. It feels like, and I'm stealing this from someone and someone I talked to, but it feels like Tony Bennett went into a lab and said, what style of play can I create that will render UNC's offense and what it does moot? And he came out with what he has, that he learned from his dad and with the pack line D, and now he's added, decent talent to it. At first, it felt like he was kind of keeping it together with glue, like, a guy here, a guy there. But now, no matter who's in UVA's lineup year after year, you kind of expect them to either win the ACC or be right there at number 2. I'm not saying they replaced UNC permanently or anything, but I see what UNC used to be when I look at Virginia. Yeah. I see the faces change, the jersey numbers change, the names change, but the style of play is exactly the same. You know what they're going to do, and you just can't stop it. You can't stop them from like Sean said, exerting their will on the game. And I think, to me, that is the most probably disappointing thing. Not that UNC lost. I mean, they were 6.5 point underdogs, so you expected them to go in there and lose. But it was just that it happened exactly how the script said it was going to happen. Like, it would have been nice if, Carolina maybe took a lead or something, or we're up 3 or up 5 at some point. But, you get down, you're up 2-0, and then you're down 6-2, and then you're down 21-4. And Doc Hillfire on Twitter, he tweeted about it. 44-39 UNC led after getting down 21-4. You just can't dig a hole against UVA like that. You can't miss bunnies. They didn't have a ton of turnovers, but the turnovers they had felt really important. You can't miss free throws. You can't miss open threes. And when you just add all that up, you get, the kind of game that you got. I mean, they had 10 more shots than UVA and still lost by 12. It just speaks to not only UNC's inefficiency, but UVA's efficiency on defense.
Something I want to throw out there, and I think fans miss this a lot. They think that UVA, just doesn't score or whatever because they don't push the ball. But what UVA is trying to do is to limit possessions because they feel like their execution is going to be better on those limited possessions than yours. For the same concept that Roy Williams always wants more possessions because he feels like that gives him more chances for his team to beat you. And was using an example that I've used before last night in kind of a chat with somebody, but UVA style of play to me is much like a knuckleballer in baseball. And I think a lot of fans wonder, well, why can't North Carolina beat Virginia? Why can't they do something? Why can't they change up to beat Virginia? You're not going to change your style to beat a team that you're going to play at most twice a year. That doesn't make a ton of sense. And we all know how embedded that Roy Williams is and how dug in he is to his style. He's not going to change who he is just to beat a team, regardless of who it is, whether it's Duke, Virginia, Sisters of the Poor, University, whoever. Um, but how do you guys feel about the knuckleball analogy? I mean, that's kind of what I feel like it is. It's their Virginia is that different enough to where when they see the other 24 or 25 teams on their schedule or 25 games or however many it is, they're enough of an aberration that teams just can't adapt to it. And usually, I'm using an example of think about Tim Wakefield when he used to pitch for Boston. I mean, he would get 15 or 16 decisions a year because he's so different from everything else that every hitter saw, and he was going to do that, and it was going to be terrible for the game, which you hear a lot, and it's going to be painful to watch, which Sean can empathize with me on that. But I feel like that's pretty much what Tony Bennett has done with UVA, and he's made them a knuckleball in basketball offense. Sean, how do you feel about that? Is that a stupid analogy, or do you feel like it's
No, it's
useful to us?
definitely not a stupid analogy. I would say, and just if I go too long on this, just cut me off because I've got a lot of UVA
Got
thoughts.
feelings,
But
yes, we know.
you know, first thing in terms of their offense, in my mind, I was like, well, it'd be great to just speed them up. But I guess with this UNC team, you speed them up, and there's a few possessions where I think Murphy, he was the only one that was willing to let it fly early in the shot clock, but he'd be wide open and he'd let it fly 17 seconds left, 20 seconds left, and he was draining threes. So if UNC were to speed it up, I think that would have just left their shooters even more open. But at the same point, from a knuckleball perspective, I feel like each year, UVA is just going to run through the ACC. I think Duke's really the only team that knows how to play them because they spread them out and they attack them off the dribble. And I'm in my head, I always have to say, well, wait till they get to the tournament. They're going to run through the ACC, and then, unless they have superior talent like they did in their championship year, they're going to get upset. And I feel the same thing this year, which is weird because if you think if it's a knuckleball, then it would go all the time. But it's like once they're out of conference, it doesn't really affect the team. It doesn't seem to affect the teams as much in terms of the pack line D. I mean, even, they're 0-2 against West Coast Conference teams, almost lost to Kent State. Now, granted, this is earlier in the year, but I think, Roy doesn't have to change the whole system. But, last night I was just like, let me go watch some highlights from the Gonzaga UVA game because Gonzaga just absolutely torched the pack line D. And now, once again, this is one of the best offenses we've seen in quite a while. So I'm not making that comparison by any means, but they did things that UNC could do. First play, they did a pick and roll with Anton Watson. I think UNC's guys are more skilled than Anton Watson, but he set a pick and he rolled directly to the basket. They didn't waste any time and they hit him, quickly. Next play, they put Kispert as a screener. He just sets the screen for a second, pops up for a three. There's no reason, UNC couldn't make those plays. But once again, it comes to quick decision making. And, being able to take advantage of some of the weaknesses of the pack line D. But to the knuckleball effect, UVA feels like, yeah, they're weaknesses, but we're going to run our stuff, and we don't think the other team can beat them. And unfortunately, in UNC's case, the double team is going to come from the big to big. UNC took advantage of it a few times, but that should be something right off the bat. You're like, okay, we know it's coming. Let's figure out how to get an easy basket off of that. There are a few times Dayron saw it coming. One was an extremely weak pass out of the post that RJ had to bend over, and that could have been an open three. Another time he stepped through and unfortunately he traveled. But once again, it's just being focused and making quick decisions. And I think when UNC has beaten UVA in the ACC tournament, you've seen like this complete focus on both ends of the ball. And I thought they showed that at the beginning, but it was just probably a little deflating not seeing the ball go in the basket. So that's kind of a rambling answer. So yes, it is a knuckleball in the ACC, but once again, it doesn't seem to have quite the effect out of the ACC. So I don't know what that says about the ACC in general, that they can't quite figure it out, but teams in the tournament seem to do much better than kind of the ACC team. So
let's kick it to
it's frustrating.
Let's kick it to noted knuckleball fan Sherrell McMillan.
For random, this is totally random and off base, but I don't think he was a knuckleballer. But when you were saying that, I started thinking about Charlie Leibrandt for some reason. I was like,
no,
oh,
Charlie Leibrandt was just really old.
Yeah,
he was a knuckleballer.
You said Tim Wakefield and knuckleball, and I was like, oh, Charlie Leibrandt. Anyway, so what Sean said about doing what you do and just kind of forcing your will on the other team, like that's what everybody always said about Carolina, or with says about Carolina, with the tempo, with the secondary break, with the blob sets, with trapping out of the half court, off of his timeout. Like they know what's coming. It's not surprising what UVA does or what UNC does. It's just that UVA has gotten to the point where they're such a well-oiled machine that you can just sub in the parts and the engine runs exactly the same. I mean, think about they've lost Diakite and Ty Jerome and Kyle Guy and Malcolm Brogdon and DeAndre Hunter, all in the last few years. And they're still, what are they, 20-3, 19-3?
Yeah.
Tops in the ACC, top 10 like they are every year, top 5 in Kim Palm, one of the most efficient teams, et cetera, et cetera.
With a slow start, like Sean mentioned. Like
right.
They've had some bad games.
They lost to San Francisco. Like, Bill Russell is not walking through that door. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I feel like that's where Carolina was, pre 2017, even to a degree in 2018 with Kobe and those guys. And it's just been a struggle these last couple of years to get it back. And again, to me, that was the disheartening part, was that Carolina knew what was going to happen and they just couldn't stop it.
Yeah. And I can understand the frustration from fans. But by the same token, I always get irritated at this thought that UNC loses because UNC's players do something terrible or the coaching staff is just inept.
Right.
And it's more than that. I mean, you're playing against, like you said, a top 10 team that has really refined their strategy. When you also consider that strategy is probably the most opposite and the most kryptonite, like you said, of making it in the lab. It's the most kryptonite for UNC style of anything in college basketball. I think all those things have to be considered as opposed to just the knee-jerk reaction of saying that, this player sucks or this player sucks. I mean, you could boil the last loss down to missing a lot of shots. And then when you've missed a lot of your opportunities, knowing that you're going to have less possessions to get that back, I'm sure it probably makes guys press a little bit, but you can't avoid giving a shout out, as ugly as it is, as much as I hate it. You got to give a shout out to Tony Bennett and his team for being able to play very well. Let's put the Virginia game to bed. I think most people want to, and look ahead. As of right now, we're recording this on Sunday night I can't think of a better way to spend Valentine's Day than with you guys. As we're recording this on Sunday night, there hasn't been a midweek opponent named to replace Virginia Tech. That game has been postponed due to COVID issues in the Virginia Tech program. As of right now, UNC's next game would be Saturday against Louisville. Thankfully, it would be a home game, but I've got to think that there will be somebody scheduled this week. I have no insider knowledge, but knowing how bad Roy Williams has expressed his desire to play, and knowing that there have already been some games postponed in the UNC schedule already, you got to think they'll fill something in. Guys, what should we look for? And I'll go to you first, Sherrell. What should we look for this team to do in the next two games to hopefully get themselves right for the last 3 weeks of the season?
I mean, I don't think anything has changed. I think now we're at the point where we're just kind of repeating ourselves. It's just take care of the ball, be confident with your outside shooting. Just hit 34, 35%, something like that. If you can go, if you can go 4 of 10, great. 4 of 11, great. Something like that. And then feed the post. Make sure that Armando Bacot and Garrison Brooks and Dayron Sharp and Walker Kessler, who had maybe his best game of the season, make sure that those guys are getting the ball in position to score, because good things can only happen when you get the ball in the paint. So at this point, I don't think it's really rocket science. It's turnovers, it's getting good shots, and then it's Caleb Love. If he can eliminate or take away kind of the other lead guard, that funnels everything down, and North Carolina can get off and run and do some things.
Sean, do you feel like there's any secret sauce that needs to be done, or is it still just correcting more of the same things that have been their Achilles heel earlier this season?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any secret sauce coming at this point. One thing I would love, which I know is not going to happen, of just, if things are not trending right off the bat, of being able to make quicker decisions in terms of lineups, of trying things out. I mean, I think both, Clemson, they went 6 minutes right off the bat without making a sub, and UVA was around 5 or 6. The good thing is there's no more defenses like a Clemson or UVA coming up. But I do think I think they just need to focus on their advantage. So we know that's in the post. I think it's more so when there's a Dayron/Armando in the game, just because they're more physical. And even against Clemson or UVA, you have Joey Hauser or Tyson for Clemson. So that's kind of the weak spot. And I feel like UNC hasn't fully taken advantage of that. They do at times, but once again, really attacking that 4. And Garrison, if he's able to hit his mid-range shots, but he's not the guy that's going to overpower and kind of really take advantage of that mismatch. And I'd love to kind of see them do a little more of the 4 out, which you've seen at times based on how they're playing. I think would like to see. I know Harris has kind of struggled when he has played, but once again, he does at least bring that energy off the bat, which I think has been lacking. And once again, you're not going to see the pack line D going forward. And I think it's just trying to improve off the Duke game. Caleb Love only hit 2 shots, one of them the dunk, but I think he still should have that confidence, hopefully, going forward. I think he can get to the basket on guys. His shot's still looking better. So I think there's still room for improvement. It's just trying to be a little better in terms of taking advantage of the things you do well.
Do what you do well and try to limit what they do well. I like the way you distill that down for us. Even people like me can understand it. I appreciate that. Boys, anything else? Parting shots before we put a bow on this episode and head on down the road?
I mean, the only thing for me is, if we are talking Louisville, they're an extremely small team. Just looking at their starting 5, I mean, they have a 6'8" freshman playing center, and have Samuel Williamson as their 4. So once again, that I think the offensive boards will be a little more available than they were against UVA, just because they do a really good job blocking out. So that's going to be an area that they need to fully take advantage of.
Go ahead, Sherrell.
I think Williamson had like 17 rebounds against Syracuse.
He did. I had to do a double check on that, but
yeah.
I'll take the big guys feasting on him. And sorry, last thing for me is just, Armando. I know I have, in the game he got taken out in the second when Clark went for the layup, and he didn't help out. Granted, he was helping out off of Jay Huff, but that next possession, he saw a sub coming in, but he did make a nice pass to Brooks. And I think for him, it's just, he's been one of the most efficient players all year. And I think it's just trying to get him involved. Like, he needs to be a focal point of the offense anytime he's in, because he does play well. And I think he needs to be getting the 10, 12, 14 shots a game.
Yeah, he's definitely much. This is going to sound like a no crap exclusive, but he really does a better job when he gets touches earlier in the game, because I think it increases his activity on both ends of the floor. I mean, when Armando's engaged on both ends, this team is a different ball club. Do we know if any of Louisville's guys are have a penchant for the illegal moving screen? Do we know anything about that? No. How does Ken Palm rate them under moving screens?
I've got
Nothing.
Well
comment.
behind UVA and Clemson.
All right, all right, boys. Sherrell, anything before we call it a night?
No, nothing for me.
All right,
Johnny
man.
T-shirt.
Yes, Johnny T-shirt. Always got to give them some love. Thanks to Johnny T-shirt for sponsoring. As always, appreciate you guys tuning in, watching, listening, however it is you're getting us. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, rate, review as you see fit. For Sherrell McMillan, for Sean Moran, I'm Joey Powell. We'll catch you next time on the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. Late.